Welcome aboard to NJ.com's Eagles Chat as we get set for the Eagles and the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday afternoon, a pair of 5-1 teams, two of the better teams in the NFC. We have with us now one of our Philadelphia sports reporters who's going to be traveling out to Arizona to watch this game and cover it for us on Sunday, Matt Lombardo. Matt, how are you this afternoon?
Joe, happy to be here.
Happy to have you and happy to talk about this game. This is a big one, and my mind goes back to last year when these two teams played in December. I think that game sticks out to me because I didn't believe in the Cardinals at that point, and they didn't make the postseason, but they certainly looked like a playoff team that day. The Eagles, of course, made it, and it looks like they're both heading back there this year.
Yeah, Joe, significant playoff implications in this game on Sunday. It affects several teams in the NFC, depending on whether the Eagles win the game or the Cardinals win. And very interesting, very similar to last year, the Cardinals get the Eagles coming off of their bye week. And one player to keep an eye on, in my opinion, is tight end Zach Ertz. He had 2 touchdowns last year against the Cardinals. Arizona is the 32nd ranked team in terms of yardage allowed to tight ends. And in their games that they've lost over the past 2 seasons, they're giving up an average of 120 per game. They've given up 12 touchdowns to tight ends over that span. In their wins, they're only allowing 50.2 yards per game. So Zach Ertz, who had a touchdown against the Giants, Brent Selleck could reemerge into the game plan. James Casey caught a touchdown against New York as well last week. I expect them to figure big into this game. And again, very similar to last year, Eagles coming off a bye, they have the extra rest. It'll be interesting to see, though, how that cross-country play affects this team.
Matt, one of the topics this week that everyone liked to talk about was last year around game time, Bruce Arians, the head coach of the Cardinals, called Chip Kelly's offense a college offense. Now, we think back in time, Bruce Arians was a college coach at Temple, so I don't know if that was meant to be as derogatory as it came off, but it did come off as, Chip Kelly runs a college offense. And do you think that's going to play into this at all this week? It's a fun talking point, but, obviously Chip Kelly's offense works here in the pros. We've seen that for a year and a half now.
Yeah, sure, Joe. Going into last night, the Eagles were the second-rated team offensively in terms of points behind the Denver Broncos. So clearly, we saw last year the Eagles' offense succeed. We're seeing it succeed this year in terms of scoring, even without LaShawn McCoy playing his best football, even with Nick Foles appearing to have taken a significant step back over the first 6 games, and even with the offensive line kind of in shambles. They're starting to get healthy. Evan Mathis will be back in a couple weeks. Lane Johnson's already back. Jason Kelce will probably be back in a couple of weeks. But I don't think that Bruce Arians' comments in terms of Chip Kelly's offense being a great college offense is going to play much of a factor in this game. It's fun for you and I to talk to. It's fun for the fans to talk about. But I think that these are two coaches that, regardless of Arians' concerns last year about how the game was officiated and how he felt the Cardinals were robbed at Lincoln Financial Field, I think these two coaches really have a great amount of respect for each other, and they're two very well-coached football teams.
Matt, how are the Cardinals doing it so far this year? We've seen the Eagles here, and despite all the issues you mentioned there with LaShawn McCoy, who really didn't do much until the Giants game, Nick Foles, who struggled a lot this year, and the injuries to the offensive line, the Eagles are 5-1. The Cardinals are 5-1 as well, but you look at their defense, they have lost significant players off of last year's team, and they even lost their quarterback for a period of time this year, one with a backup. How are the Cardinals 5-1 at this point?
Yeah, I think you have to look at Andre Ellington. He's having a big year out of the backfield for them. And you have to look, even though the defense as a whole lost a lot of pieces, still a very dominant secondary. You have Antonio Cromartie and Patrick Peterson. Peterson, I caught up with Riley Cooper this week and wrote about it on the site. He said that he believes Patrick Peterson is the best cornerback in the NFL. So if you can't throw on the Cardinals and they can kind of dictate what you want to do, and Todd Bowles, the defensive coordinator, former defensive coordinator for the Eagles after Juan Castillo was let go a couple of years ago, and Temple product, just like Bruce Arians, coached him at Temple. Very good defense, despite what they've lost talent-wise. They still win defensively. And you said it, Joe. They survived with a patchwork situation at quarterback. Carson Palmer is back in the fold at this point. You saw what he did last week against Oakland. It's going to be a game where they spread the ball around offensively. Larry Fitzgerald isn't as much of a factor as he used to be. I've heard several players say John Brown is the fastest player in the NFL. He's the rookie wide receiver they selected this year. And you look at the solid defensive play, they're well coached, and they get it done with speed offensively. It'll be a tough test for the Eagles out there this week. It really will.
No doubt, probably their toughest test of the season thus far. I mean, I know they have some tough games coming up here, but thus far a road trip to Arizona.
Indianapolis was a big test, and
Yes,
you
it was.
go on the road. But moving forward, I mean, they're getting into a murderer's row because you have the Cardinals this week, then you travel on the road for a second consecutive week, taking on the Houston Texans, who are playing very good football next weekend. Then you have Carolina coming in on a Monday night, and still looming on the schedule are 2 dates with the Cowboys. You sandwiched in between that the Seattle Seahawks. You still have the Green Bay Packers on the schedule. It's a tough test, but I look at this as when the season really kicks into gear for this team because they've survived not playing their best football and emerging at 5-1, but they're heading into the toughest portion of their schedule, which happens to come right at the start of the stretch run.
Matt, I think we'd agree that if the Eagles are going to get through this stretch run and play well through it, not just survive, not just go 500, but win most of these games, they're going to need better quarterback play out of Nick Foles. And the one thing that I have found interesting about Foles, we could talk the word, you could use the word regression a few minutes ago, and how he hasn't played as well as last year. But the one thing that's most interesting to me is how the red zone efficiency for the Eagles has gone in the tank here. Why is Nick struggling in the red zone so much? Forget the other plays. When they get inside the 20, why is he struggling, in your opinion?
Well, it's fascinating because even though they're second in the league in scoring offense, they're 32nd in the red zone. They're the worst red zone offense in the NFL. I think part of it boils down to the offensive line, Joe, because you're playing a couple weeks ago guys like Matt Tobin. David Molk is still in there at center. You lose Jason Kelsey, who's an all-pro caliber center. You lose Evan Mathis, who's an all-pro guard. You take those pieces away, and all of a sudden defenders aren't playing on their heels because they're not going to fall back and play a zone defense in row 3. They're pinning the ears back. They're getting to the quarterback. They're pressuring Foles. And, again, it comes down not to run the ball effectively inside the 20. You become one-dimensional, and if you're getting blitzed and you're under pressure, bad things have happened for him so far this year. And again, I said Foles has regressed, and I stand by that. Anytime you throw 7 interceptions for the first 6 games after throwing only 2 a year ago, that qualifies as a regression to me. But I won't completely judge Foles and say that this year was a complete step back until I see him playing behind an offensive line of Lane Johnson, Todd Harriman, Evan Mathis, Jason Kelsey, and Jason Peters. Until he has that full offensive line back intact, I still give him a little bit of rope in terms of judging him and saying that let's just wait and see until he gets that starting line back to see what he is as a quarterback. And you're going to have a nice sample size. You'll have about 6 or 7 weeks of that line being healthy, assuming they don't undergo any more injuries between now and then.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Matt Lombardo and Joe Giglio talking Eagles here as we get set for this game on Sunday. Matt will be out there in Arizona covering it for us for NJ Advanced Media. The Eagles and the Cardinals 5-1 apiece. And you talked about playoff implications here and what this game could mean down the line. When is it too early to start thinking about that stuff? When is it too early to start thinking about seeding in the NFC playoffs? I mean, you mentioned the Eagles still have the Cowboys twice, and the NFC East is still very much in jeopardy, of course, with the Cowboys being a very good team this year. But when do you start thinking about that this game, we could look at in December and say, well, that's why the Eagles are the 2 seed instead of the 3 seed?
Right now.
Right now.
You turn the calendar next week, you're looking at November. You're looking at the games that you're playing down the stretch. We talked about the opponents. Cowboys twice, the Giants, the Redskins. The division games are still important. You still need to win those games. Those teams aren't on the level of where the Eagles and Cowboys are. Still have the Packers, still have the Panthers. But I think that this is the game that when we, as you said, whether it depends on if the Eagles are the 3 seed, the 2 seed, whether they get home field advantage throughout the playoffs, this is a game where you can look back and say not only for the Eagles, this is why they ended up where they were, but it depends on what happens. You could see this shuffling around the Carolina Panthers. It could have an impact on where the Packers end up finishing. You start looking at that NFC West, and can the San Francisco 49ers get back into it? So this game has a lot of implications, not just for the Eagles and not just for the Cardinals, but throughout the conference. And I think that when you start looking at the stretch run of the NFL season, it's November, it's December. It starts a week early for the Eagles this year.
Yeah, I agree with that. It does. It's a big game on Sunday, 4:25, a primetime spot. Not many games in that spot because all the scheduling they have with Thursday night games, Sunday night games. This is going to be a major audience for this game on Sunday afternoon. Matt, I want to ask you about the Eagles' defense because we were both there in the press box watching that game a couple Sundays ago. The Giants came in playing really well up to that point, 3 in a row. They had won and scored 30-plus a game. Yep. And the Eagles' defense just dismantled them that night. Who is the Eagles' defense right now? What are they? Do we expect them Sunday and moving forward to play, at a high level, or was it just for one night? Because we've seen them be up and down this year.
Yeah, Joe, they're really, you hate to say that they're a mirage, but it's almost an optical illusion because you look at they're middle of the road, they're about 15th in terms of points allowed, about 12th or 15th in terms of yardage. They're a middle of the pack defense, but they come up with timely big plays. You saw the sacks against Eli Manning, critical plays in the third and fourth quarter. We've seen Malcolm Jenkins with a critical game-saving interception in the fourth quarter off Andrew Luck against the Colts. We've seen Jenkins intercept a pass against the 49ers. It just seems like when this team needs a stop, they get that stop in the third or fourth quarter. When this team needs a turnover, they get that turnover. And one of the key factors in that game Sunday night against the Giants, I talked to Trent Cole, the linebacker, as well as Brandon Graham, and they both said they knew Eli Manning's keys before the snap. They knew whether it was a run or a pass, similar to what happened to the Eagles against the 49ers a few weeks back, where San Francisco said they knew the signals for Nick Foles and what was going to transpire on that play. Billy Davis and the defensive coaching staff did a great job zeroing in, figuring out those tendencies, and you saw the result. You saw the 4-sack, 5-sack performance, Connor Barwin coming out party, Brandon Graham in the backfield time and time again, Vinny Curry getting in on the act. I think this defense is better than a lot of people think. I think the front three was Cedric Thornton, Fletcher Cox, and whoever you rotate in at that other end spot, be it Vinny Curry or another guy you're rotating in there. It's one of the top defensive lines in a 3-4 scheme in the league, in my opinion. They're coming together nicely. It's just a matter of trying to figure out whether or not Bradley Fletcher and Kerry Williams can hold down the fort in the secondary. Are they Seattle of a year ago? No. But with this team, the amount of points they score, as proficient as they can be offensively, you finish in the top 10 to top 12 defensively in an NFC that's as wide open as it is, you're going to do pretty well for yourself.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think the blueprint probably is that Saints team that won a Super Bowl about 4 or 5 years back, where they didn't have a great defense, but they made plays, they turned the ball over a lot, and got the ball back to their offense. You mentioned turnovers there, Manny. You look up at the statistics for the Cardinals, the one thing that jumps off the page, they don't turn the football over, and their quarterback doesn't throw interceptions. Now, the Eagles have won those games, specifically that Colts game that you mentioned. That was because of a big interception. They almost stole that game in San Francisco because of defensive and special teams plays. How big of a role is that Sunday, the Eagles, maybe turning the Cardinals over and swinging the game in their favor?
Hey, Joe, huge as always. And again, you're looking at the Cardinals playing last week. Chip Kelly, Billy Davis, Pat Shurmur, they all have an extra week to prepare. I think you're going to see a team that comes out firing defensively, and I'm not going to say you're going to see the same type of performance you saw against the Giants because you can't draw that up every week for the talent the Eagles have. But I think it could be a similar type of output where you get a couple turnovers, where maybe you get an interception late, maybe you sack Carson Palmer and you force a fumble. I think this game will hinge in the third or fourth quarter on a turnover that the Eagles get, whether it's Fletcher Cox, Cedric Thornton, Brandon Graham, whoever comes up with it. I think there could be a big turnover that stems the tide of this game in the third or fourth quarter on Sunday.
Matt, what's the latest on the injuries? Earlier we talked about Andre Ellington, a very dynamic back out of the backfield. If Michael Kendricks, who's been out for a while now, over a month with a calf injury, if he could return on Sunday, that would be a big boost against a guy like Ellington.
Absolutely. The injury report came out about an hour ago. Michael Kendricks officially listed as questionable. Darren Sproles also listed as questionable. I think there's a better chance that you see Kendricks line up and play. He practiced all week, as did Darren Sproles. I think there's a chance Darren Sproles played, but if I were a betting man, I think it's a better possibility and a bigger possibility that you see Kendricks out there. And you talk about what the defense did against the Giants. Joe, that was without their best playmaker. That was with a rotating cast of Casey Matthews and Emmanuel Acho in there at inside linebacker and first-round pick Marcus Smith. You put Kendricks back into that mix. That's the recipe of how you start to get some of those timely turnovers, how you start to get those sacks, and you can try to contain a guy like Ellington from burning you with the run game.
All right, Matt, it's prediction time here. I think the Eagles are the more talented team. I think they're the better team, but this is a road game, and the Cardinals obviously are pretty game there in Arizona. What's your prediction for this one on Sunday?
I've grappled with this one all week. I've gone back and forth probably 15 or 20 times. I just look at what happened last year and how rested the Eagles were coming off of the bye week, and that was one of those games during that stretch where the Eagles in that 11-game stretch down the final 11 games. They allowed 21 points or fewer. The defense started bringing its lunch pail to work against the Cardinals. I don't think that's going to be any different this time around. I think that this is a battle-tested team. They're, I believe, 13-2 over their last 15 regular season games with Chip Kelly as the head coach. I think they've been exposed to all of it. I think they come out, they win this game 27-20.
Great stuff, Matt. We appreciate it. Have a safe flight out there and enjoy the press box. I'm sure it's a good one considering they're getting ready for the Super Bowl out there in February.
It should be a lot of fun, Joe. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. We'll check back in next week. Matt Lombardo covering the Eagles for us on NJ.com. Thanks for watching.